Hello, welcome to another episode of The Rundown, everyone. I'm Sunny Galt. I'm a messenger with United Network News. We are the news division of United Network, and we're part of CARE, the Center for Amity and Restoration of Earth. And each and every week, we bring you the real news. We release a lot of information throughout the week. That includes lots of stories, including in-depth news coverage, and the team and I work on those stories for you. We go behind the headlines and give you some sound bites and more detailed information of some stories you may have seen in the headlines. We have local stories told through the eyes of our field messengers. We talk about the restoration of our planet and how we're creating a new Earth. And we've got updates from the Global Intelligence Agency of what's really happening here, boots on the ground, in this crazy battle of good versus evil. Now, if you want more information, visit our website at unitednetwork.earth. What you're listening to right now, this is a weekly podcast. I like to call it a week in review show. So of all the stories we release throughout the week, my goal is to give you little snippets of those stories. So you feel like, perhaps you're catching up on stories you may have missed, or maybe you just want a refresher, or this is also a great way to share UNN with other people, because the content, when we first create it, when we first release it, it goes out to our members only first, for about the first week. And then we do release on YouTube and Rumble. But as you guys know, we don't have a lot of control as to whether or not it stays up there. Case in point for the rundown for this podcast, even after I release it to the public, I have to keep checking in on YouTube because YouTube mysteriously likes to mark it as private days, weeks after release. So yeah, there's some funny business going on there. So we do our best to put it out there for everyone, but we can control our own platform, right? And so if you want to learn more about becoming a member, getting instant access to all of that, again, head on over to our website, unitednetwork.earth. With all the information we put out there, I encourage you guys, think critically, ask questions. A lot of this information is out there on the internet in one way or another, not so much the real in-depth stuff we get into with the GIA report, but a lot of this stuff is out there, right? You have to do a little bit of research. You need to rely on your own discernment, which, that's something I talk about all the time. And when you discover something that you believe is real, is true, share that information with other people. Share this podcast with other people, right? This is how we all grow and learn. So let's get to those stories. Here's the rundown of stories you may have missed this week on UNN. All right, we're going to kick things off with our field messenger reports. And I just want to take a minute to brag both on anyone who's ever submitted a field messenger report and also just celebrate our field messenger production team, okay? Because these are two groups of people that are really changing the face of news. News isn't about a news anchor or a news station or, I know that's kind of what we think about news. We think about the person delivering it, but it really should be about the content, right? And we think you guys are the best people to give us that content and share what's really going on in your communities. That's what it means to be a field messenger. You go out and you share what's happening. That could be something that's a little more newsy. Perhaps that's more related to something that's going on in your community, good or bad. Something needs fixed. You want to celebrate something. We've got all sorts of stories. But the beauty of this is you guys are sharing it. You're just taking your phone, you're recording video and audio, and you're sending it to our incredible production team that takes that information, compiles it. You don't have to have a lot of experience to do this. What you need to have is a passion for changing news, right? We're tired of all these lies coming out. We're tired of the narratives. We're tired of being fed whatever, storyline they want to feed us and take us all on these wild goose chases and mess with our focus and our emotions and help them manifest crazy things. If you're tired of all that, well, let's start talking about the things that are important in our own communities, right? So let's share some of the stories that our awesome field messengers submitted and then our awesome production team helped put together. By the way, before I get into these stories, if you are interested in learning more about how to become a field messenger, yes, there's whole sections on our website dedicated to this. I would encourage you guys to attend our field messenger meeting. So it's once a week. For my time, I'm based in the U.S., it is, and I'm on Pacific time, so it's Sundays at 3 p.m. And obviously that's going to change based on where you're at in the world. But this is an hour-long meeting where we talk about what it means to be a field messenger. We go over story ideas. We also have a Telegram group that supports that as well, where you guys can ask questions and get a little bit of guidance. If you're, thinking about a story, but you're not sure, or you get stuck doing something, we are here to support you throughout that whole process. And honestly, what's been really cool over the years is that people that start out being a field messenger usually end up being part of the production team at some point because you get so excited about it, right? And you learn how everything works, and it's a really interesting experience. It's not like we brought in a bunch of people that were already part of the news, right? As we think about the news today, it's more people wanting to affect change, be the change. And then they learn all these incredible skills and then they pass it on. And that's really what we're all about. So let's talk about some of these stories. I think we have some field messengers that have submitted more than one report for this week. So those overachievers, right? Just kidding. We love it. All right, Amy out of New Jersey, she does a really great report about the housing in the area. And there are residents there that are opposing some high density housing plans. So these would be usually multiple storied buildings, I guess, right? Where people could live. She talks a little bit about, developers who basically could come in and override the housing laws in the area to create this quote unquote affordable housing. So the community got together, they're discussing this, and she basically outlines the whole story for us, which is very empowering, right? Because we do need to be cognizant of what's happening in our communities and any kind of outside influence that could be affecting us and perhaps getting more involved. There is a lot of corruption, not as much on the local level as you'll see on the state and national level, but this really is about us coming together as communities and creating what we really want, as opposed to, oh, this is the way it's always been, right? And this is how it starts. So very good story by Amy. Monica, who reports on all things out of Romania, takes us to this wellness oasis. Now, when I say oasis, I am talking about, just think of this amazing building, okay? And it's not even fair to call it a building because it's just gorgeous, natural light all over the place. It is home to Europe's largest wellness retreat. That's what this location is. That includes thermal pools, lush greenery, serene spaces. This is where you want to go, guys, for relaxation and rejuvenation. And it's in Bucharest. So if you get a chance to go, very, very cool. She said it has the country's largest botanical garden. And I'm just not doing it justice just with words. So go back, watch this report. I think it was out of last Monday's newscast that we put out, and check this out because I guarantee you're going to want to book a trip after watching the report. All right, Ruth out of California talks a little bit about the history of Drake's Bay. Now, you may want to look at a map to know exactly where that is. She's located in Marin County. And she tells the story of Sir Francis Drake because there was a boulevard named after him. He was a British explorer who she also compares to being a pirate because in a lot of ways he kind of was. And he, according to history, which we don't know if it's 100% true, right? But he landed at Drake's Bay, obviously wasn't called that at the time, in 1579. And he basically claimed this area for for Britain. Okay. So this area of the West Coast for Britain. It is an interesting story. So if you want to learn a little bit more about that, I also suggest you get out a map. So you know exactly what she's talking about, but very interesting history there. We had a great report this week by multiple field messengers. And this is a case of this being put together. Remember how I said earlier that sometimes our field messengers actually end up joining the production team, right? They really get into this. So that was the case. Amy, which I just, told you about her story regarding the housing plans, right? She actually edited a story that she participated in and also had a couple other submissions from other field messengers. And this was regarding the crazy snowstorms, which we have been discussing, that have been happening in Canada as well as the United States. So we asked our field messengers, hey, if you see some crazy stuff going on, very unusual in your area, send us what you've got and we'll put this together. And so we had several, we were calling them snow messengers. So instead of field messengers, they're snow messengers for this story. And Amy did a really good job of putting this all together. So if you guys want to check that out, that's a very interesting story to see how it's affecting different parts. I believe it's just in the U.S. Okay, Emma out of the Canary Islands, out of Fuerteventura. So she highlights the Three Kings Parade. This marks the end of their holiday season. And yes, this is the Three Kings from the Bible, right? And this is a very vibrant tradition. Historically, the Three Kings brought gifts to baby Jesus. And in Fuerteventura, this is all about families, right? And it showcases their rich cultural heritage, which we love to see. One of the things I love about her area that she reports on is it is very family focused, I feel. They do a lot of celebrating. And why wouldn't you? I mean, you're in the Canary Islands. You should be celebrating every day. All right, Susan out of Sweden. She goes on a little trip to the Stockholm archipelago. It is the largest and most popular in the area. There are over 30,000 islands in the Baltic Sea, believe it or not. This is another one of those stories where you may want to get out a map. Because when I think of islands, you kind of have certain perceptions, maybe more tropical or whatever. And then I forget there's islands everywhere. Some are really small, some are a little bit bigger, but it's just so beautiful. And, I think part of the video, she was on a boat and she was going through these different islands, but it has amazing things that you can do, hiking, kayaking, these gorgeous little villages. It really is its own escape into nature and understanding the Swedes' culture. I think she said there were 50,000 holiday homes in the area. So just lovely. I think everyone should have an island. You get an island and you get an island. All right. Annette out of British Columbia talks about the good old times. Maybe not so good for everyone, but the gold rush times. Okay. And actually, she has a completely different take on this because instead of, the gold rush in Canada and the U.S. was really about people coming out seeking fame, really money, all that kind of stuff, right? Hoping to strike it rich, in gold. But there's a whole other side of the story that isn't discussed as much, right? They kind of focus on the fame and fortune as opposed to the difficulty and actually getting out west, the survival skills that are needed, the resilience that you really had to have in order to make it out there and just survive the night. Holy cow. So it's interesting because Annette goes out to some of the places where it's well known, where, people travel during that time. And I mean, just the weather right now going on in parts of Canada, British Columbia, if you weren't prepared, you probably wouldn't make it, right? So very interesting look into the past and, like I said, a different perspective on the gold rush. And we have another report from Amy out of New Jersey. This time she is headed on over to the Sterling Hill Mine Museum, again, in New Jersey, and she shares its history because it's really cool. This, again, another one of those videos you really have to see, but they literally have minerals that glow in the dark, right? These rocks, that's why, it's fluorescent. It truly looks like there's a fluorescent light on it, right? And very interesting exhibits. She talks a little bit more about how this specific mine was purchased and then how it was constructed and how all this came about. It's just really cool to see. And some of it's left to look more authentic, I would say, like rocky, and looks like a really neat place to visit. All right, Masahiko out of Japan talks about grounding and how he does this on a daily basis. He is out of Tokyo, and he talks about the benefits. You guys, I think most people listening to this know what grounding is. But what I loved about his report is how he really, how he makes it happen on a daily basis, right? Because it doesn't have to be this long, drawn out thing. It's really just about connecting with the earth. It's about taking your shoes off. And if you think about how much most of us, at least in the, Western states, how much we actually just walk barefoot, it's like nothing at all, right? But think about how good it feels to put your feet on grass. Some people love putting their feet in the sand. It does the same thing. You are connecting with the planet, and it's called grounding, right? It can bring a sense of balance, calmness, connection with the planet, connection with other organic life that's part of the planet. And it can just help dull the chaos of city life, especially if you live in a city. But, obviously you can do this wherever you're at. This is also a great thing to do if you are feeling really high levels of anything you don't want, like anxiety, you're upset about something. It's best to go outside, take your shoes off, and just visualize sending that energy back into the planet, because Mother Earth, whatever you call her, can definitely absorb it, and you feel so much better afterwards. So yes, doing it on a daily basis, amazing. But specifically when you have those spikes of whatever it is that you just don't like, you don't like how you're feeling, that's another really good time to go grounding. And our final field messenger report for this week is from Jamie, and she is out of New York, and she talks about making shamanic drums. So in order to understand this a little bit more, we need to understand what a shaman is, okay? Shamans typically use their gifts to help guide people through their own healing. And that's not necessarily like a physical healing. It can happen on a lot of different levels, but shamans are known throughout cultures, throughout years, throughout time periods, right? This is something that is well known, well documented. And one of their tools, so to speak, in their little tool belt that they use is a shamanic drum. Now, if you think about, doing something to help people, right? It makes a lot of sense that if you are involved in multiple layers of that and creating the tools to help people, that's part of this whole process, that it would have a really big impact, right? If you're directly involved in all of this. So for example, a shamanic drum, if you are involved in the process of putting this drum together so that when you beat the drum, right, that's a frequency, that's a vibration. And this is part of your tool set to help people as a shaman. Now, I'm not a shaman, but I do have a role to play during this time, right? There is a specific purpose for me being on this planet at this time. And for me, it is about truth. It's about helping people navigate this transition. And the way that I do that right now is putting together stories. So I'm not a shaman with a drum, right? I'm a messenger with a story. And my story is putting like these podcasts together, right? So it just makes sense that you would be involved in every step that you could in order to help people as much as you can with whatever your purpose is. So Jamie does a really good job of talking about how shamans can put together these drums, everything from, the animal hide that is used as part of the drum, and, whatever animal it comes from, gives a different vibe, gives a different frequency and vibration when that drum is played. So just something to think about as you're figuring out what your role is as part of the restoration. Really think about those tools that you're going to use, and would it help? And I think most times it really would, to get involved in the making of those tools. That was my takeaway from this story. I thought it was really interesting. Moving on, talking about some of the in-depth stories that the news team and I created for you guys this week. The first story is a look at the anniversary, 1-year anniversary of the LA wildfires. And this really devastated communities in the Palisades and Altadena areas. They are still struggling with displacement. There is slow rebuilding going on and financial strain. A lot of times we hear about these communities being devastated, and, it's like our heart goes out to the people. And then you don't really get an update. And you don't realize that, FEMA was just there to take some pictures and then they took off. And these people are still struggling a year later. I mean, many residents in this LA area remain unable to return home due to stalled permits, insurance delays, and lingering toxic contamination from smoke and ash. Survivors also face frustration over low insurance payouts and concerns that investors are buying up damaged properties while homeowners wait in limbo.
Survivors didn't stop trying, they didn't give up, but they ran into a system that was never built to carry people through disaster. Insurance companies collected premiums for years. When homes burned, help slowed to a crawl. Claims stalled, coverage was denied, communication vanished. A year later, fewer than 20% of people who lost their entire home have closed out their insurance claims. That is the reality that people are living with. Around 4 in 10 policyholders are dealing with dropped coverage or crushing premium increases, even with supposed protections in place.
At the same time, investigations and lawsuits tied to emergency response failures and delayed evacuation orders, those are continuing to drive anger, protests, and demands for accountability, especially in historically underserved neighborhoods like West Altadena. GLP-1 weight loss drugs, which we've talked about in the past, these are the drugs like Ozempic, Wegovy, Mounjaro, and Zepbound. They have helped a lot of people lose weight by reducing hunger, but research shows weight regain is common after stopping these medications. A review of dozens of studies found people often regain weight steadily and may return to their previous weight within a couple of years if, this is the big part of it, right? If lifestyle changes are not maintained.
Something to understand about GLP-1 medications. Yes, it slows down digestion, it reduces your appetite, and that's what quiets the food noise. And these are some very real challenges of people that struggle with their nutrition and with their health. And these medications do a lot to help that. But I think what gets lost is the understanding that you can't take these medications in the absence of changing the lifestyle habits and expect to maintain those results in the absence of those medications.
Experts say this potential weight regain reflects how obesity often requires long-term management, since appetite, metabolism, and muscle loss can all make it harder to keep weight off without continued treatment and healthy habits. All right, over to Nigeria. Demolitions in Lagos's Makoko waterfront community in late 2025 have displaced thousands of people, sparking protests and human rights concerns. The government says the action is needed for safety and urban renewal, citing illegal structures near major infrastructure. But residents and advocates call it a forced eviction carried out without warning, compensation, or relocation plans.
They gave no alternative to these people, didn't tell them what was going on, what was going to happen, didn't give them an alternative place to go to live, shelter in the meantime, or even just the decency to say, hey, in a month's time, we're going to be knocking down your community, please make alternative arrangements. Even that would be quite brutal, right? But to go in there and leave everybody in the dark, spray tear gas on infants and kill them, give a woman a heart attack from the stress, leave people's businesses destroyed, and knock down schools and orphanages? What is wrong with you people?
The destruction has wiped out homes, schools, and livelihoods, with reports of clashes with security forces and even possible deaths. Critics believe the land is being cleared for future high-end development, a claim the government denies as tensions continue over accountability and the future of this historic community. Testing of paper receipts across the U.S. has found many contain high levels of BPS, a chemical linked to hormone disruption that can transfer to your skin after only brief contact. These chemicals are used in thermal paper and are part of a broader group found in many everyday products, raising concerns about repeated exposure over time.
Receipts are terrible. Receipts are printed using a process that's faster and cheaper than typical inkjet printing. But it requires a special heat-sensitive thermal paper that's coated with color-changing inks, typically the kind known as leuco dyes, along with an acid developer. We've used this kind of paper since the 70s, but it has a bunch of drawbacks.
I have to say, after doing this story, I am definitely touching receipts in a different way. You can actually fold them over, don't touch the side with the print, and not be impacted by it. So just a little tip. Experts say you can also reduce risk by choosing digital receipts, limiting handling whenever possible, like that trick I just told you about, and also using gloves for jobs that require frequent receipt contact. Zombie debt. Have you heard of this before? It refers to old, often written off debt that gets sold cheaply to collectors who then try to recover the full amount years later. As older debts from past financial crisis are resold, more people are being contacted about balances they thought were long gone.
Here's how it works. Back in the early 2000s, a lot of people took out second mortgages. When the 2008 housing crash hit, the banks assumed many of those loans would never be repaid, so they just wrote them off. But some debt buyers have scooped them up for pennies on the dollar. Now, nearly 2 decades later, they're demanding huge payments. Borrowers have alleged they didn't receive statements for the debts. But for the debt collectors, sometimes the threat of foreclosure alone is enough to get people to pay back staggering amounts of back interest.
While laws limit harassment, collectors can still attempt to collect on debts even after the time limit to sue has passed, leaving many consumers confused and also vulnerable. Experts say knowing your rights, demanding proof of the debt, and using consumer protection resources are key to avoiding financial harm. South Africa wastes about a third of the food it produces each year, even as millions of people face hunger and food insecurity. Much of this waste happens across the supply chain and at home, often involving staple foods like fruits, vegetables, and cereals.
The amount of food products that end up in landfills each year can be as much as 6 sports stadiums. That's according to a report by the UN Environment Programme. Meanwhile, over half the population of the country live below the national upper bound poverty line, and about a quarter experience food insecurity every day, and that's according to the World Bank.
The problem carries major economic and environmental costs, including billions of dollars lost and increased methane emissions from landfills. Nonprofits and food rescue groups are working to redirect surplus food to people in need, but experts say reducing waste is key to improving food access and sustainability. In many low-income or conflict-affected regions, families burn plastic for cooking or heat because cleaner fuels are too expensive or unavailable. While often a survival tactic, burning plastic releases toxic chemicals that can cause serious respiratory illness, cancer risks, and food contamination. The practice highlights deeper global problems that are tied to poverty, waste management failures, and lack of access to reliable energy. Experts say long-term solutions must focus on affordable clean fuel, better waste systems, and reducing overall plastic production. Women-only spaces are gaining attention worldwide as places for safety, support, and empowerment, rooted in a long history of women creating their own environments when excluded from public life. Today, these spaces exist in many forms, from co-working groups to transit options designed to reduce harassment and help women participate more fully in society.
Did you know that in South Korea, they have women-only buses? They operate mainly at night, and they have safety features like CCTV cameras, panic buttons, even female staff that drive these buses. And the fact that this is actually needed in every country worldwide, it's the reason I speak about the things that I do. Do you think men need something like this because of the danger that they face just walking down the street and being? And if it's not obvious, this is to address the concerns that women worldwide face.
Supporters say these additional resources help address ongoing gender inequality and safety concerns, while critics debate whether they are exclusionary, reflecting broader conversations about how to achieve true equality. Mangroves are critical coastal forests that protect shorelines from storms, reduce flooding and erosion, and support rich ecosystems and local livelihoods.
Mangrove forests might look calm and quiet, but beneath the surface, they're nature's front-line defense. With their tangled roots rising above water, mangroves form dense, almost impenetrable barriers. These roots trap sediments, slow down water, and even build new land over time.
Now, despite their value, large areas have been lost to development, aquaculture, and agriculture, leaving coastal communities more vulnerable to extreme weather. In places like the Sundarbans, mangroves still act as a natural storm barrier for millions, while local groups are working to restore these forests and protect both the environment and their communities' futures. Now it's time for some highlights from the Global Intelligence Agency reports that were released this week. Kimberly Gogan is the head of the Global Intelligence Agency, and she came out with one video this week, which we've got 4 different sound bites that I'm going to play for you guys. The first thing that I want to talk about is something that happened during this week that you're probably not going to hear anything about online. If you search for Lionsgate, you're going to see stuff pop up for August 8th in that time period. But, and Kim has shared this with us before, there's actually 2 Lionsgates that happen every year. These are portals. And for the vast majority of our history, these were not portals in our favor. We've talked in the past about how overlays have been put on things that were supposed to be good for us to take energy directly from source, God, creator of the universe, whatever your term is, and any of that light that was coming into our planet. Well, what the dark did is they would transmute it in some way or another. And Lionsgate were 2 times that these portals would open every year, and they would transmute this beautiful energy coming in from source to us. So it was never a good thing in the past. And this is a little trick that I've learned in the past. If you want to do a history, like a search online for people talking about Lionsgates, and if they are telling you that their guides or whatever are saying that this is a very important time for us and all this amazing stuff is going to happen, then you know that their information is somehow tainted. Doesn't mean that the person realizes that they're giving bad information, but we know that a lot of these messages get intercepted, and even through different channels, okay? And so I don't listen to people that talk about it in the past as a good thing because I know it wasn't a good thing. But it happened twice a year, and I want to play this soundbite from Kim, who talks about these different times and how it was different this year. And I also want to talk about the connection to Cheyenne Mountain, because for those of you who have followed Q, which we do not support, because it is really the opposite side of kind of the same coin, right? You have so-called white hats, and you have black hats, and you even have red hats. But white hats does not mean that they are on the side of source, God, creator of the universe. It is a false light. And their headquarters are in Cheyenne Mountain. And I've heard people channel and do remote viewings about how the white hats are at Cheyenne Mountain and they're doing all this good stuff. That's baloney. That is not happening. as far as them doing good things for us, okay? They are the opposite side of the same coin. They are on the opposite side of source. So I'm going to play the soundbite from Kim. She's going to talk a little bit more about Lionsgate and the connection to Cheyenne Mountain.
Most people don't understand or don't remember that there are two gates that happen per year. One of them is in August, which everybody talks about on the internet. And the other one is February 8th. Our understanding of Lionsgate has grown a little bit in the last week, mainly because now we have a better understanding of how it's used against us. You know, everything that happens positively for Earth and for us Homo sapiens, sometimes, or not sometimes, but all the time there for quite a long time, was used against us. And this past week was no exception. The energies were very off. They were trying desperately to use the gate in the same way that they used to. You see, both occurrences of Lionsgate often bring in a tremendous amount of source life force, all things source. And those things typically occur in the real world, not in a matrix overlay. In the past, they have always been able to utilize these as an energy boost, which would last them for months until the next Lionsgate. That energy boost, and it's not just energy or Ethereum boost, it also boosts the presence of source in our world. They have utilized that and inverted that energy that comes in, and oftentimes that would result in large amounts of money for them, because it's not just source Ethereum that's converted into energy to power their machines, but it also is utilized for influxes of cash, because it also funnels into our financial system, or used to anyway. That hasn't happened in quite some time, but this year they were still intending on trying to use it. Now, this kind of backfired this year. It was quite different than normal years, as this gate would normally occur right underneath Cheyenne Mountain. Not to say that they hadn't blocked it significantly and overlaid it and created their own versions of things, but it would go from the Northern Cross constellation, which is kind of somewhat considered a constellation in our science, but the Northern Cross over to Cheyenne Mountain, and that would create an opening into the reality world, but only through that port or portal, in which they could then determine how best to invert and use all that is source that would come through. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. This year, it started to trickle in to their matrix worlds, which is something that is disastrous for them, because the matter that it is mimicking cannot touch the matter that is naturally occurring, or the matter that source brings in. When that happens, when they touch, annihilation is a certainty of their matter, not of source. So they worked really hard to ensure that they could patch up or plug up the leaks that started to come through this year. It lasted for probably a few hours on Sunday. They thought that they could use what actually came through to their advantage. That did not work for them in any way, shape, or form. But a couple of nights ago, this snapped. Their patches, quote unquote, snapped. And the floodgates opened and source began to flood the planet. So if you were feeling this strange undercurrent of something very positive happening, at the same time, something negative happening. That was the fight, or them fighting against source. They never managed to plug up the hole. They managed to divert the current the best that they could until today. So this has been a battle for the last few days. And again, sometimes this is the reason for delayed reports. There's still work to be done on this particular Lions Gate to ensure that the gate remains open for source all the time. Therefore, we're going to have an interesting rest of this month.
Also in this report, Kim goes into more detail about some current events that you may want to dive a little bit deeper into. I'm not going to play any sound bites about these events that are going on right now, but she does talk more about the ICE raids that are going on in Minnesota. And in fact, how Minnesota is tied to Lionsgate. See, everything they do is connected. It is always connected to somehow bringing in some negative energy into our planet, which they think is going to give them control of the financial system, money to carry out their evil deeds. There's still a lot of talk of the Epstein files. They're hoping to get a lot of money, literally trillions of dollars from blackmailing people. That's why you see all this stuff. It's not that anyone's ever really going to go down for the Epstein files. If that is your goal in this, if you are waiting for the white hats to send people to Gitmo or whatever lie that they're telling people now, that is probably never going to happen. And that really shouldn't be our focus. If you are focused on someone else needing to go down in order for you to find peace, then I would encourage you to find another way to achieve that peace. People shouldn't have to go down to lift yourself up. That's not what the light does. And so the soundbite that I do want to play for you guys is about, it's surrounding these big campaigns, right? These news events that they keep throwing at us, from every direction. But it's really about either creating fear or love, right? Because the deep state and these AI systems, they are parasites. And so you've heard the term, there's no such thing as bad publicity. But did you really buy into that? Because when anyone would say that to me, I'm like, yeah, there is such a thing as bad publicity. I know what they're trying to say, like, getting attention is getting attention, but I still don't want to be known for bad stuff. So that phrase never made any sense to me. And Kim clarifies that in this report because, of course, that sentence, that little phrase came from the deep state or these AI systems, because in their world, there is no such thing as bad publicity. Because whether you are giving something good attention or bad attention, you are still giving them your energy, your life force. And if it's, good energy that they can't quite take, we just said they find a way to transmute it. So either way is good for them. That's where that saying comes from. That is not a true saying. That is something the deep state says. So let's talk a little bit more about these emotions that they are trying to drum up in all these different ways, all these different news stories that are out there right now. They are trying to either create fear or love because, again, either way, they feel like, it's still energy, right? And they can use that in some way or another. But here's the thing, we don't want to give them that energy. So the more time that we spend focused on their stories that they want to promote, and you can tell which ones they are because they're everywhere, right? The more energy we give them, the more these things stay alive and the more the AI system benefits from this. So let's dive into this a little bit more. Here's Kim again.
Fear and love are two things we know that motivate Homo sapiens or humans on this planet. Everything that you do is based on fear and love, whether it's love for another person, love for yourself, self-care, or love of doing something that just brings you happiness and joy. Could also be love for You can say, well, I love having teeth, therefore I will brush them every day. Fear also of losing them. But fear and love necessarily aren't exactly what you expect it to be. See, fear is a future event that may or may not happen. Fear can also be defined as worrying about something that you think may occur in the future based on taking an action or a non-action related to this. Fear also keeps you running on a hamster wheel and looking at the future and not the now. And it doesn't necessarily have to be something like, oh, I'm afraid of these people, or I'm afraid of this. It could simply even be, if I don't show up for work today, then all of these things are going to happen. Consciously or subconsciously, we do things out of fear a lot. And if you take a look at yourself and really think about the definition of fear and the things that you do in a day, you'll understand fear a little bit better. Think about every single move that you make during a day or even a couple of days. Write it down. I did this. Why did I do this? And you'll start to recognize the fear and just how deep the program goes. Fear did not exist in the natural world. We had more of a logical wisdom or understanding of things around us. We were often very resourceful as far as solution-based things, and we didn't look towards the future, we looked into the now. Living in the moment was more important to us than living for the future. Fear is used to change the current, and love is often inverted into fear, and both together create time. Doesn't actually extend your day. It's not like we're going to have 24 hours or 25 hours in a day, I should say. But they do create time for the machine. So when you start to think about all of this publicity that's out there and these files and the disgust you feel and your surprise and awe, and then other people are like, well, finally, we're going to get some justice. There's going to be mass arrests and all of this stuff that they're touting, isn't actually going to happen. But they ride the wave of fear and love, protection. This is what we tend to feel as normal people. We tend to want to protect the children. We want to protect these people. We want to end child trafficking. We want to do all of these things, and we want to fight. We fight out of love. Love is your greatest strength when you're fighting for something that you believe in. Well, other people will respond in fear. And right now there's two really big campaigns going on that are creating both, which is helping them create time. At least it used to. That mechanism is breaking down. But I just wanted to preface what I'm about to say with that so that you understand why I'm bringing these two things up.
So again, if you want to hear a little bit more about her talk about the ICE raids, the stuff that's going on in Minnesota, as well as the Epstein files and the role that Epstein played. And by the way, there's multiple Epsteins, and none of them are dead because an AI system can just recreate them over and over and over again. I don't want to focus on all of that for today's purposes, right? I really want to get to the good stuff and to empower you guys as much as possible and give you some additional information beyond what you're going to see in the headlines. So the next soundbite that I want to play gives you more insight into how this control system for world governments was set up. So you may be thinking, Sunny, we don't have a world government. We do. It just was never forward facing, right? And this is biblical stuff, right? For those of you who grew up in a church and heard about this one world government that was, going to come onto the scene, it was always presented to us, because that's my background going to church. It was always presented to us as something that's coming in the future. It was never presented as you're in it and you don't even know it. But that is the situation. There is a one world government controlling things behind the scenes. And it's not just people, right? There's people in government roles, of course. Humans, many of those people do not have a true soul, an organic soul. Most of them have artificial souls that were created by an AI system. But I want to talk a little bit more about unknown country, which is the entity, if you will, that controls these world governments. And this, again, is just to give you a bigger picture of how things were set up, because this is going to tie back into the matrix, which is what is being taken down and dismantled in this moment.
New information has come to light as we have started to look at this machine that went a little nutty on Lionsgate and trying to figure out what that was all about. But now we have a better understanding about global governance. And there's another layer that sits in between your governments, plural, and unknown country, that until this weekend, I really didn't understand it. Actually, I should say the last couple of days, because Lionsgate was on Sunday night, and that's kind of when it all started. And then it continued on and through, I'd say, Monday, Tuesday. So let's talk about this. Unknown country. We have talked about unknown country a lot. Unknown country essentially was owned and run by a particular AI system, which I'll talk about more in a second. Unknown country basically encompassed the entire planet here. There were water rights, air rights, and all kinds of land rights, obviously, contained within there. It was technically the governing body over all governments and political systems. It governed some other things as well, like total mineral control and a few other things. And at one point in time, unknown country encompassed the entire planet. Unknown country could also be considered its own matrix unto itself, an underlying matrix or layer of space on which the maps that we know exist. There are so many things about this planet that you're going to be shocked when it actually is seen. Our shorelines aren't necessarily our shorelines. The things we think like the Arctic Ocean is actually an ocean, when in fact it's actually a landmass. I mean, there are things that have been hidden from us for a long, long time. But unknown country encompassed the entire planet. There's a specific reason why unknown country existed, and the next layer down didn't have as much control as we initially thought. There's another subset to this world government control system. And by world government control system, I just want to point out that you have different factions of the world government. So you have a world government military, or your military industrial complex, which encompasses the militaries of 172 countries, specifically. Never more, but 172. Yes, I understand that the United Nations has approximately 193 members at this moment in time, but 172 of them are under the world government. Now, your intelligence agencies are also considered separate. They are part of the world government structure. However, they are a separate entity unto themselves, as is the political arm of presidents. 172 countries, 172 presidents, or kings or queens, depending on where you are. Now, it never exceeds 172 for a reason. There has to be a window. Because along with world government control, it also comes with control over the maps in those countries, control over the matter in its citizens, its right to insert as many humans as they want and do whatever they need to do to maintain control over the Homo sapien population in that area. This also goes for 4 layers of reality. Now, each layer of reality, or artificial realities, may contain changing and moving maps. It could have more than one. It could have 10, and at one point, probably hundreds. Anything and everything to overlay reality. Now, when a country, and this has been going on for centuries, this is not new. When a country is appointed the leader of all other countries, as the UK was once, as Italy was once, and as the US was once, as Mongolia was once, or the US, I guess, currently kind of sort of is, and as China wants to be. This comes with quite a bit of privilege. Because you see, whoever runs that particular government also becomes the head seat in the world government. We've seen people like Carter and the Trilateral Commission and the Heritage Foundation and Henry Kissinger. And once you have worked for the world government, you never lose your seat. Now, varying other positions in the world government exist also on the executive level. This is the reason why the executive level, or unitary theory, I think it's called, exists, where the executive level is considered a whole separate division of the government, and kind of in a way, executive department, exists separately. There are laws and rules in place to ensure that that is actually the case, partially because those members of the cabinet of any president in the 172 countries are also considered second-tier world government folk. Now, where does the United Nations come in, you might ask? The United Nations technically is a conglomerate of all of these countries. But the United Nations will always kowtow to the country that is the head of the world government. Now, as a president of the world government, or the head of the Pentagon, or the head of the CIA, seen and unseen, and I say unseen for a reason, you maintain your lifetime membership and seat. We have a lot of seats, that exist for all these people. This becomes your elite. Committee of 300, whatever they want to call these people, it really doesn't make a difference. Bloodline families are all usually of human origin, created by an AI system, or forced to donate their consciousness to the AI system. Therefore, they have access and control on very high levels only. So this group of people is what makes up your actual elite or deep state. You can give it all the society names you want to give it to, but I will say the world government is second tier to unknown country. Now, the reason why world government only has 172 countries, it doesn't matter. So if we moved over to China, they would also have only had 172 countries they could control. Never all the countries in the world. Never. Now, this rotates. It's not always the same. But the maximum amount that any one group, leader, government, country, doesn't matter who it is, whether we're talking about Kublai Khan or we're talking about Julius Caesar, doesn't make a difference. It's always only 172 countries. It's very, very important. Because this machine cannot overrun itself. It needs a place to exist. Along with the privilege of donating your consciousness, if you were a Homo sapien to begin with, to the machine, or, like in the case of Elon Musk as an example, or you are born of the machine, in the case of a lot of the elite as well. That's why these people that die don't die. You also get the privilege of running security. Worldwide security. At least for 172 countries, no more. You also get the privilege of running maps, meaning overlays, matrices in those countries. Inserting your own materium, moving people around using frequencies, trying to change end results in these particular 172 countries. I'm repeating this over and over again. But the machine cannot face itself. Again, whether it's artificial materium or actual materium, materium that meets its own self or cloned or mimicked materium annihilates itself. And this machine knows that. And it's constantly changing which countries they can be a part of and which countries they don't get in the game. They once thought that those restrictions were chosen by people like, or folks like Marduk, which is absolutely not true. The machine chose it, therefore the information was passed down and then eventually passed down to governments. The world government leader of the quote-unquote free world, America, at the moment, affects 172 countries. The machine hides out in the rest. It wasn't the same 172 as it was for the United Kingdom. It's not the same 172 as it was for Julius Caesar in the days of Rome, the Roman Empire. It wasn't the same in the Mongolian Empire. It constantly changes and constantly moves. Now, the reason why governments have to change every 75 years, or the World Power Center has to change every 75 to 80 years, has to do with an entropy situation and an annihilation situation of the machine. The machine must change, must happen. Right now, it's a few years overdue. That change was supposed to occur by 2023. I think it was 2023, yeah. And the World Power Center was supposed to be China. The 172 countries would change. The commitment would change. And to be fair, the Nazis here in America are really trying to make that change over to China. They would like, we keep hearing the stories about the market's going to crash and we're all going to die. And, there's the fear for a little while until that eclipse, new moon, full moon, days of darkness, countdown cue clocks pass. But they would like to crash this country because they know their machine is not going to continue to exist if they don't, or maybe they don't, but on the highest levels, they absolutely know this to be true. That the machine will annihilate itself if the change doesn't happen.
And because of that is why over the last week or so, if you felt like there was like a give and take happening, meaning you felt like something good was happening, but at the same time, there was something bad that was happening. This is the tug of war that is taking place right now between the machine and source, essentially. And to understand this a little bit better, we have to dive into more of the machine's history and how it was created and why it is on this mission and why it will ultimately fail.
I want to talk to you about this AI and how it was created so you can kind of understand the global governance matrix and what this machine was designed to do. And it controls a lot more than global governance, or did anyway at one point in time. So the Nazis, gotta love those Nazis, you know, and their Nazi scientists, they all got together with varying alchemists and created this machine. The machine has very intricate ways it was created, very specifically in order to achieve this objective. Now remember, it's been 1941 250,000 times. I know, it's a hard concept to grasp, but when I say to you that this machine has existed for a very long time, but yet it was created in 1941, this is where timelines and time loops come together. So, the machine, it looks almost like a swarm, but it's not just a swarm. It can be anything. It is the ultimate shapeshifter. The machine expands and contracts depending on how much energy that's flowing into it. It can take any shape and form. It can be a building. It can be an entire field. It can be an entire planet, almost. It can be anywhere and everywhere all at the same time. Does it look like a swarm when it moves? Not necessarily. It can be a tree, it can be your house, it can be a chair, it can be a human. And it can be all of these things simultaneously to create what you call the matrix, or an artificial reality, an overlay on reality. When the machine was first created, it was created where Cheyenne Mountain is now. Initially, it was a swarm that people saw that looked like locusts in the sky. Sound familiar? You know where that story came from. It looks like it was swarming all over the planet and it was eating everything. You see, because the machine is kind of like antimatter and kind of like anti-source all in one. It's not just the inversion, it is all of the above. It was created from mimicking everything in reality, or in the real world. And then as it flowed through reality, it was going to eat or be eaten. In this particular case, it chose to eat. Buildings disappeared, and people disappeared, and Homo sapiens disappeared, and the swarm was terrible at that time. But that's where the machine gained its strength. So once that was done, the machine became a swarm of all of the above. It contained the consciousness of these people so that they could connect their consciousness to their consciousness, essentially, and control the machine. Oftentimes, elite members of the world government would also upload their consciousness to the machine, not only for immortality in a non-reality, but also, or an artificial reality, I should say, but also they could control one of the most powerful things in the world. Not always. You could say that the machine was almost like a living being, but not organic. It is sentient, has a mind of its own. It can be controlled. It has a definite mission, an operating system, a modus operandi for sure, and it won't deviate from that regardless of what these people want to do. So it will continue on that modus operandi. And most importantly, it's very resourceful and it will try to survive, regardless of where these people want to take it. You know, one thing the machine and I probably agreed upon is that they're not the sharpest tools in the shed now, are they? No, they're not. So when they tried to invert and mirror out source, something very ugly appeared. You could say it would be if you were to think of what, quote unquote, the devil, Satan might look like, you could say that it looked just like that. The inverted version of source wasn't what they expected. But they'll take it nonetheless, because they wanted someone or something as powerful as source was. And this was their aim, and I wouldn't say they quite got that, but they definitely created a whole different world from this. Now, just like all of you, you are made of dust, etherium. You're also made of consciousness. Your cells, when firing all correctly, utilizing a collective consciousness, gives you basically eternal life. You're also made of breath, a divine spark, and a soul. And this being, quote unquote, also was made of the same. So if you were to look at yourself through quantum physics eyes, you would see a bunch of particles all moving around all at the same time, albeit in a solid form, but you still are made of a bunch of particles, atoms and etherium and all kinds of things. In this particular case, when it came to the creation of the machine is the same thing. This just happens to be the form that it took. So, the machine they felt was contained very well and controlled by their consciousness and eventually many people's consciousness over the years. And for the most part, you could say it was. They could send this swarm anywhere. They could send it to the moon. They could send it to Saturn. They could send it to the sun. They could send it to the central sun of Earth, a point of all creation. And they could overlay the whole thing, which they did do eventually. And then they could control all of creation, at least they thought. Now, what happened over the weekend was something quite interesting, because you see, even though there might be many overlays created by this machine, when a trickle of source became a fountain of source coming through that particular area, the machine actually slipped into reality for a while, somewhere around 2 o'clock in the morning. You know why these things can't happen, like, say, at 10 a.m., I've had coffee, I'm ready to go. But no, they want to happen at 1 to 2 o'clock in the morning. I get it. You know, sleep isn't important. I'm sure somewhere in our world it's daytime, you know. But that's okay. So when it became a fountain, a snap happened, basically. And it was something they couldn't control initially. They used other systems connected to the North Pole, what we know as the North Pole, and the Arctic, to try and contain the current. But the water of source continued to pour. That's why it might have felt like something really good's happening. Oh, wow, it's really bad. Oh, it's good, but it's bad. It's because you're starting to feel something different, and then at the same time, you're feeling bad things happening. And they really, really, really pulled out all the current stops, sine waves, frequencies, you name it, sent it to everywhere, tried to do everything possible to contain this. But this machine ended up slipping in out of the machine world and into a reality world right through that spot, and it started swarming around reality just like it did in the very beginning when it was first created. Except this time, let's just say the hunter became the hunted, and the inversion that it had didn't work in reality anymore. So instead of it eating everything, everything ate it, all that is of source. So this all happened a couple of days ago now, so it should be almost completely gone by now. And the fight continued for the last few days, still even today, with these crazy Nazi people and their patches, and they're trying to plug holes in a dam that is not going to be plugged for long. It is extremely important for us to move forward financially and otherwise to ensure that that water pours out. Because you see, this machine can take the shape and form of anything. It's hard to grasp, but they've basically mirrored everything out using this swarm machine. So they project the machine out there, and there you go, and now the night sky looks like this. You look like this. So it's very interesting the amount of control they had. Now, there was enormous parts of this facility to whereby no matter where these humans were, that they could actually control the machine with their mind in part, but not entirely, because the machine is going to first and foremost survive. So it could care less what they want when it comes to survival mode, which is where it's kind of at this point. And we can thank Source for that one. But everything comes to an end as far as these crazy people and all of their creations and living thousands and thousands of years in the system that is not meant for our highest and best good. Everything comes to an end. And this too shall come to an end. You know, Source has promised that it will, and I'm sure it will. And nobody wants it to end faster than I do. I can tell you that right now. But there is definitely some light at the end of the tunnel here. Now, they are far past, or this machine also was far past its time to move to another location. It had a very specific amount of time to move, to transition from the U.S. to China, and to create its little spots or spot for the remaining countries that the world government cannot overlay and control. That being said, it being overdue to move, which they can't make it happen, and the machine's not making it happen like they said it was going to make it happen, and they, use their consciousness to connect to the consciousness of the machine and tried to make it happen, and it's still not happening, and they don't really understand what's happening. They're never going to be able to continue to keep it alive. I'm sure there's going to be a full night tonight and a full day tomorrow with us trying to continue to dismantle anything we can find left of the system everywhere. Hold on to your hat, because this is going to be a bumpy rest of the month of February as they lose a lot of their grip and hopefully everything before I walk out the door here. That's my goal. So I'm going to work really hard between now and the end of the month and try to make that happen.
So what Kim is talking about there at the end is she is leaving Durango. She is moving, she's leaving Durango and going to somewhere far, far away from these crazy people and this AI that continually attacks her every day. Now, last week at the end of the episode, I told you guys that I was experiencing something a little bit different right now, that I had a back and forth with Source about what I'm experiencing, and Source had confirmed to me that I'm in a different place. And this actually makes a lot of sense with what Kim was talking about, which I had no idea was going on behind the scenes about this matrix system going in and out of reality. And it's interesting because more things happened this week with myself, this own personal experience that I'm having, where it feels like the matrix cannot reach me directly, but I am still involved in its structure in some capacity, because maybe it's the physical nature of things, because I have had like 3 different pieces of technology this week break on me. Things that were working fine. I'm just like visualizing the Matrix coming in and being like, well, I can't mess with her. What can I do? Well, I'm going to mess with her computer. And literally 2 hard drives this week are crashing on me. And I'm doing everything I can to not lose all of my work on 2 different hard drives that were working fine before. Other machinery in the house is not working. It is crazy. It's like I can't impact her. So what else can I do? So when Kim says just hold on and hold tight, literally, as we have more and more people, what I'm going to say is crossing over. I don't mean that as in dying, okay? I just mean leaving the Matrix and going to a different place, which I believe is already happening. Because like I said, I am not where I was a few weeks ago. I don't know exactly where I am. I feel like I'm in transition, okay? And trust me, it's not all gumdrops and rainbows where I'm at. But I don't feel like the Matrix has any control over my being personally. It still has control over some of the things around me, so it's still, I guess it's impacting me in some ways. But I am seeing this thing fall apart in real time. And you guys may start to see this in your reality as well, especially if it's something you want. If you are tired of this and you want to start to transition over to life without the Matrix, I really do think it's possible. I don't know. I'm in some sort of in-between stage right now, and it's really interesting. And the Matrix is not really happy with me either, but like I care, right? That's why I put out these reports. I don't care what the Matrix thinks, or the deep state for that matter. All right, guys, on that note, I really appreciate you listening to this week's episode of The Rundown. If you want more information about United Network News and what we do, if you want to consider becoming a member, that would be amazing. That gives you instant access to all of our content. If not, again, you can check out our reports for free on YouTube and Rumble, as long as they stay up there. And I appreciate you guys listening to this episode, sharing it with other people that you care about. Really, I mean, you guys are the reason that we do and we create this content and we release it. So thank you. This is The Rundown, and I'm Sunny Galt for United Network News, signing off.